Welcome to Table Talk. We're happy to have you with us. Lovely December morning. I'm Sandy, and I have with me today VJ. So we are going to talk about a few things, and VJ's got some great tips for us today. She's our expert, precise quilter.
When we see VJ, we know we're gonna learn something.
Yep, always learn something new with VJ.
I always just get in teacher mode here.
That's right. She's good at that. Okay, so just as a reminder, you should have gotten an email, but today is day 2 of our 12 deals of Christmas. So check your email. Each day there's a different deal and something up till Christmas. So something's on sale every day, a different category. So we had a gal come in the other day and ask if these were in yet because we had the collection, and we usually get Riley Blake's pre-cuts ahead of time, but they have finally arrived. This is for the new collection Nutmeg. So
it is so fun.
It is so beautiful.
Do they show like their prints on the back?
No,
so
we'd have to just kind of.
Oh,
it's just these beautiful.
I feel like we're seeing a lot of blue, orange, and yellow.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, for a while we were kind of slim on blues.
And
now
there's really been some beautiful. Also in is a new art gallery collection, and I don't have this to fan for you because the bolts are in the back room, waiting for Shelley to receive them. So we'll be putting those out today. But we don't usually get art gallery pre-cuts, but we've got the 10-inch stackers, and this is Gail Lorraine is the collection by Elizabeth Chappelle. So Gail Lorraine. That makes me wonder who Gail Lorraine is.
Yes, and I love art gallery fabrics. They just feel like
beautiful.
silk. They're
beautiful.
Amazing.
Yep. So some fun things in. This quilt on the table. This Anna did, and the pattern is called Radio Waves. Anna did a little switch on the pattern because the pattern has these pieces here, strips as well.
Oh, I see.
But we just did this little pretty focus print,
fun.
the poinsettia print.
Nice.
And I like that because it kind of simplifies it a little and less busy. So we have those kits in. Riley Blake? Christmas Village. Thank you. Yes. Kathy's brain is so good. I showed you before the kits that we have, but we didn't have our sample in. But we now have a little holly jolly Christmas.
Cute.
Jolly Christmas. And I just think it's pretty. Holly jolly Christmas.
Who made that one?
This one was not Erica, Nicole.
Oh,
Shannon's daughter, Nicole.
Oh,
So
nice.
Erica's the one we talked about that does cross stitch. Nicole does some beautiful wool work.
Oh, okay,
So
cool.
Yeah.
Lovely.
that is a doable project to get done in time for Christmas giving. That's fun. And also we got a new supply of the fabulous puzzles with Santa sewing and quilting, and I love these. Now this one is I'm going to give to my mom, which is 300 pieces, because we gave her a 1,000-piece one time. She was like, yeah, no. But this one is the 1,000-piece, and this was a 300-piece. But they're just fun for Christmas time when you're just sitting around, or when, like this morning, the wet traffic's bad and you can't leave the house and you're stuck in the snow.
Exactly.
Then
I remember when I was young, my mom bought like a painting, and it was 1,000 pieces. It took our whole family, 4 people, to finish it.
Yeah, I like to sit with a group and just work on puzzles. It's fun.
I do. We do that every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, always. And but we can have a puzzle together in about 2 hours.
Yeah, because when you've got multiple people, it's like.
Yeah, and my daughter's like a wild creature. She just goes. Yes.
BJ's daughter does the funnest calendars for Christmas.
Yes.
Can't wait to see this year's.
Yes.
Oh, she's
I'll
amazing.
have to share that. She's doing with her dogs.
Oh, yes.
They're always
I
with her
remember
dogs.
now,
And she's doing fashion through the ages this year.
And last year was
the paintings.
Yeah.
Paintings.
So
yes.
it was famous paintings. Her dogs
With
were.
dogs.
Yes. Yes, she finished up
Hysterical.
everything. I know she finished up everything last weekend, and so she's just photoshopping now.
So it's just so fun. She goes, elaborate. These dogs are dressed. Yeah. So
Yes,
funny.
Yes, they are just.
So we all look forward to seeing what VJ's daughter's calendar will look like for the year. Does she know how much we enjoy it?
Oh,
Have you
I
told
tell her.
Oh,
I
good.
tell her. Yes.
Too fun.
Absolutely. She knows she's hit of the party
Yeah.
here.
Yep.
So.
We've had lots of new fabric collections come in.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
One that is in, and Emerald's going to walk over and just show you the boxes.
It's from Lori Hope. And then these are all the boxes we have today. And then you'll probably see more fat quarter cut later.
Yeah, so there are, just in that fabric collection, there's 47 bolts.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's what I said. Well, I said something, yeah.
And then we have the whole station.
And where am I going to put it? But it's her new calico, right, Kathy? Calico. So we've got that to unbox. We've got new art gallery fabrics. We've got new Moda. We've got new from Riley Blake this week. Just always new. So
You need to get out.
Yeah.
And just check everything
get
out.
out and
It's
check
just-
it all out.
Yes, it's amazing.
Do they still count as like this year's design, or are we going into the next year? already?
They're in this. They would be this year.
Oh, okay.
And then,
So,
yeah, I think Kathy said that with Calico arriving and the art gallery that came in, I think our final collections for December have arrived.
Okay.
And then we'll start in January, getting a whole new load. So
right. So
yeah.
come in and check this out
Yeah.
before everybody else does.
that's right. So lots of fun. Fun things going on. In the village, still going is the elf scavenger hunt. If you have not been to Chocolate Covered Wagon, you need to get there and get some Christmas candy, Christmas fudge. Caramel apple is always good.
Just
Doesn't matter.
caramels are
Yeah.
my favorite.
Yeah.
I love those.
So or the,
Sandy likes the orange sticks a lot.
oh, they call them. What do they call those? They call them something besides orange sticks.
Mhm.
But oh, their orange sticks are fabulous. They're like chubby, not like
They
your
are.
normal. They're these chubby. Oh, they're yummy.
They are delicious, I have
yeah.
to say. Yes.
So let's talk about something. What do we want to talk about today, Emerald?
We want to talk about matching points. Well, before we do that, can we show that thing one pattern we have in Restock?
Oh yes. So Restock. We finally got these in. You know, they come out of Australia. So this is that hatched and patched pattern. That's for this cute little bag.
Yeah.
And the construction of the bag is easy once you've got your, wool applique, and it was so fun to do. This is called Allah's Mary bag. So those are back in stock. And we will be doing a giveaway at the end of the video, so watch at the end and I will announce what we're giving away and how to do that.
Okay, cool. Okay, wonderful.
So for this week, because we have so many people asking about matching points, and I know I'm not an expert, I just after I make that stocking, I'm like, I cannot even do this well. So we're going to have VJ talking about it.
Yes.
So can you walk through some points? I guess you have some tips and stuff you want to talk about. I'll let you.
Oh, I have a list of things. and actually, I was going to type up something and have you put it online.
Oh.
And I ran out of time, to be honest with you. So I will make sure to get that to you, and then you can put that online.
Yes.
Okay. So I do have a little list on my phone here of things I want to talk. Okay. All right. So I've made a list of things that you really need to do in order to have really precise sewing, and you'll be able to keep all of your points. I think the very most important thing, I always press my fabric prior to ever cutting anything. And I know I'm extremely OCD about that. And if I'm going to do triangles, I always best press it, absolutely, because it just helps it so the fabric doesn't stretch as much on the bias. So I think that's the number one thing. I think another thing you need to do is make sure you're cutting very, very precisely, and make sure that you're using your ruler. Make sure you're just making sure you're cutting it exactly the size that it tells you to cut it.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next thing is pressing, and I always told my students back when I taught, the three most important things are pressing, cutting and making sure you sew an exact 1/4 inch seam. And I have to say that one thing that I've done, right now I'm working on a quilt that ends up being 1-inch blocks, and I just check periodically, am I actually sewing that? And I use a 1/4 inch seam, but sometimes you can get a little narrow and sometimes you can get a little bit wide. And I think a lot of people are under the illusion that where they feel like, okay, this presser foot that I've got on this machine is 1/4 inch, and it's actually almost closer to 3/8 of an inch. And so you need to make sure that you're sewing with a 1/4 inch seam.
And on a 1-inch block, it's going to be a big
It's
problem if
a
it's
really
not.
big deal. And another thing that goes along with that, don't switch. If you're trying to sew something really exact, continue sewing on the very same machine from beginning to end, because there's a variation often. Even though you might be using a 1/4 inch seam on one sewing machine and switch over to another machine using another 1/4 inch, you can have a variation. And I know I showed you a long time ago this triple Irish chain that I had done. And I had to redo all these blocks because I had bought a new machine and started sewing. And so I had to redo so many blocks on that. Took me forever to redo that.
What makes that difference, though?
I don't know. I even read that in a book. So that is not just VJ saying that. There was a book that I read about that on tips, and it said continue sewing on the same machine all the time. So anyway, so that's I think that's a really important tip. I always pin, and I know when you're sewing straight seams, a lot of you might think that is just silly, but I'm just going to show you on this. And this is just going to be a 9-patch block, okay? And I have I do have extra pins here. So when I am putting a 9-patch together, you can see that I press these seams towards the dark, and I've pressed these seams towards the darks. And so when I nest those together, and I always just snuggle those seams up to one another so they're kissing one another. And I always pull this fabric back just to look at it. And then I will stick my pin right in there. And I do the same thing over here. Now, sometimes if you've got a little bit of extra fabric, that was, I did a good job on sewing that. Don't always do that. Sometimes you have a little bit extra fabric on one side or the other. If that does happen, ease that in. Don't just try to sew it along there. You want to ease it in. And I always just would take and pin here. And I know it takes longer. What can I say? It does take longer. But I would go ahead and sew that after I've done that.
Yeah, and it takes longer, but if what you're showing with is precision,
right,
this is what it takes.
Right. And so that's what I do. And I don't think there's any kind of a hard and fast rule that you press it towards the dark. It depends on, and that's one thing I think that's important also, is you need to decide ahead of time, how am I going to press this so it's going to work with the next block? Sometimes I do press open. On this block, it has, this block is not a block you do in a half hour, let me just tell you. This took me quite a while to do. This was for our cream and sugar block of the month, and I finished this up last night. But on this one, I did press every one of my seams open. Okay. And one thing that it does do is it really does eliminate some of the bulkiness that you have.
At these intersections, you just...
Yes, some of these are just, it's really, really helpful. So one thing also on the 9-patch, I just wanted to show you, sometimes I will go ahead and not only just press my seams to one side or the other, I take, and I'm just going to show you on this one, I take and split this seam up like this, and you can't backstitch if you're going to do that on these seams. But you can see how this just eliminates all of that bulkiness.
Yes.
Now, you can't always do that, but
Right.
that's one thing you have to think about ahead of time as well. It does take a little bit longer, of course, to press this because you're trying to do these in different directions.
So you need to think through before you start sewing.
Absolutely. Very important to
And
do
I
that.
like a pattern that will tell me, some of the pattern designers will tell you, press this way, press,
right.
you know.
And sometimes it will say press to the dark, sometimes to the left, sometimes it says press the seams open. But, and sometimes when it says press to the open, I don't do that.
Yeah.
But, you know,
Yeah.
it just, you got to
learn
use some
what-
of your experiences too. So, okay, let me see, what else do I do? I think, you know, doing some blocks, I still remember back when I first started quilting, and I was a clothing sewing person for years and years. And so when you cannot apply the same principles
Right.
from sewing clothing to
Yeah.
making
No,
a
yeah.
quilt. Yeah. And I still remember the first class I took. I'm sure the ladies were just laughing at me. And I know they were, because here I'm trying to apply all these principles. And, you know, they are quite a little bit different. So just keep that in mind, okay?
And just because I can quilt does not mean I can put a zipper in your pants or,
That's
you know.
true. They are two
They're
totally
two different things.
Two different things. I have to say, we have so many wonderful tools out there though as well, because I absolutely love my block locks. And so if I'm going to do half square triangles like I've done in this quilt, then I am constantly using my block locks for my half square triangles, because I think those are really, really important.
They are a game changer.
Oh my gosh, they are. Because when I started, what I was initially started to say is my half square triangles were wonky shaped, and my flying geese were really weird shaped, and the square and square. And now we have all of these wonderful tools that we can use that just make life amazing for us and so much easier. So, you know, my sweet son gave me the flying geese rulers. One of the things I wish could change, but I don't
Yes.
think there's any way that possibly can, is with flying geese, you have to have the exact size ruler for the exact size. You cannot interchange them. Whereas, actually, if you had a 6.5 block lock for half square triangles, you could use that for any size.
Yeah.
So,
But different on the flying geese.
but much
blocks,
different.
yeah.
So when it comes to flying geese, I really like using foundation paper piecing as well.
Yeah.
So, but I wanted to show you a little bit on, I brought everything just to show you what I do when I'm making flying geese, like I did on this little quilt. This actually was flying geese. This was a flying geese over here as well.
Yeah, because you don't need that seam in the middle there when you're,
Right, I mean, and you could do that, but it's not
But
going to
yeah.
be quite the same. But, so I had to make sure to be really, really accurate, because this finished at, well, it was cut at 3 by 5.5, so it finishes at 2.5 by 5. And so I had to actually, you know, really use some talent.
That's right.
I'm joking around when I say that, by the way. Okay, so when I always draw a line. I know you can use a little tape on your machine, but I just think drawing a line is more accurate. So when I'm drawing my line, I often use just this, I don't even know, this Sew Line pencil. And it does come in different lead colors. You can get yellow, pink, white. So you can use it on dark colors and light, of course. And so I just want to make sure to back off just a teeny bit here. So because I want my line to be exactly from point to point. And sometimes I just check and see, have I gotten the points? And I just can sit down, put a movie on that I've seen before, because I don't
Yeah.
You're doing repeat.
repeat because I'm doing this
Or a
thing
Hallmark
again.
movie, because they all kind of are
They
generally
are.
the same.
They are exactly the
Move from
same.
the city to the small town, go
Yes.
back home, yeah.
Some
Yes.
misunderstanding.
Yes, there's some misunderstanding. there's
Exactly. So I do make sure and get my line drawn here, and then I always, when I sew it, I try not to sew exactly on the line. I sew ever so slightly above the line.
And why?
And the reason why you do that is because when you fold that over, it's going to the thread itself takes up some space.
So that's it.
And so then you can, when you fold that over, you're going to line up exactly.
Yeah, you're actually folding the exact line.
Yes, exactly. And so that's really helpful. And you really want to make sure that you've gotten the point here and the point here, because those, I think, are the very hardest to get. And I do take the time and I check, okay, do I line up here before I ever take and trim it off? Now, if I'm doing really tiny half square triangles, I will actually come down and do a little bit smaller seam allowance. Probably in between an eighth and just because it reduces some of that bulkiness as well. But on this size, I would just go ahead, line up my 1/4 inch, go ahead and cut that off, and then I can go ahead and press that. Now, on this particular block, I went ahead and just pressed I pressed my seams open on that, just because then it's nice and reduces that bulkiness. And so there you can see that. Now, at this point in time, if you want to, you could go ahead. If you want to be really OCD, I usually am not this OCD. I can just check to make sure, have I gotten this lined up along here?
Oh, yes.
Okay. But I usually have a bigger ruler, so I don't want to cut it off so it's going to be smaller, of course. I have to say, normally I don't do that. But, okay, then your next step, you're going to lay your next one on, and once again, I've stitched right above, and then I check again, and there we go. Now, I have to tell you, there's just sometimes, and I wanted to show you this. I could have redone this, but I wanted to show you that sometimes it just is not always exactly perfect right there. It just isn't. But I don't think that's a really big deal. I don't get in a tizzy about that at all, because when I go ahead, and so here I've got 2 that are finished, and you can see this is just the hardest place. But if I was trying to sew these and match these up, then I would just go ahead and, if I'm trying to match points, I would go ahead and just stick my pin in here, make sure I'm right at that point, stick my pin in over here, line that up, and I would make sure to put a pin on both sides. And I do pull that back and just check, okay, have I lined that up okay? And then I can go ahead, pin this, and when I'm sewing a point like this, I put 2 pins in there to hold that. Okay.
Because you don't want that pin to be on the point. It kind of moves.
Right, yeah. I have to tell you, if the pin is on the point, it's going to move. It will definitely move. But then I can just go ahead. I take that out, and I can just go ahead and sew along there. And then I can have something and I did that on this, and so then I can have those points that can match up exactly. Okay? But like I said, I know my method takes longer. Okay, it does. But the other thing that I do is when I'm sewing along here and sewing my 1/4 of an inch seam, I make sure to sew right there at that very point too. And so it's always really nice to be able to have that seam. If you have that seam pressed there nicely, then you can just judge yourself and know exactly where to sew.
So you are saying that you make sure when you're sewing, your needle goes through this point.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. Because if you go down below, you're going to cut your point off. If you go above, you're going to have a lot of extra fabric there that you probably don't want. But I have to say that looks better than if you have your point cut off. Okay. So that's just some of the things that I do. This was a half square triangle that I just sewed together. So it's the same kind of thing though, and I usually sew I don't usually sew an exact fourth of an inch seam. I sew ever so slightly less when I'm sewing that. And then I can go ahead and cut that. And one thing you can do whenever you are.
Now, I noticed when you took the pins out, there was one on this side and one on this side.
Yes.
Instead of like pinning here.
Yes, I always put my pins here. And another thing, I always use these really tiny little pins. Whenever I'm sewing this, I always put pins on both sides. And I always put them parallel. I never want to put them exactly where I'm sewing. Because then I can just sew, I just sew all down one side, leave all the pins in, turn around, sew down all the other side. Then I take all my pins out at the same time. And then I can go ahead, cut everything, press everything, and then I can go ahead and square these up. Now, I have to say, one thing that I think is a really good thing when you're making half square triangles, so many of the patterns will tell you, and I'm going to just show you on this as an example here. So for this little block right here, it said to cut these particular squares at 5 7/8. If you do that, you're going to have exactly the size that you need. You're not going to have anything extra. So I always go through my pattern and say, okay, this is going to be a half square triangle because I'm using that right over here. So I just marked, okay, I have to cut that at 6 inches because then I can use my lock block and then I can go ahead and trim
Square
around
that
it and square that
And
up.
it'll be just perfect.
So I think that whenever you see anything at 7/8, I would check and see, okay, where am I going to use that? Because that's, that I don't know, I just think it's so much better. You're going to have better result if you do that. So, look, I've said everything that you need that I need to. So anyway, but I know I like things to match up, and I have to say my seam ripper and I are very good friends. Because if something doesn't match up, then I definitely am going to rip something out and redo it. My rule of thumb is I don't rip out any seam more than 3 times, or any point more than 3 times. I have done that. I've done it more though. But anyway, so those are just some tips that I use. And anyway, but it ends up, I think, just being something that you're going to be pleased with.
Yeah.
So for anyone who just start trying flying geese, like what would you say to them? Because
Just those things,
I feel like
pressing and
I feel
pressing.
there are people who want to get that perfection, but it's probably not going to be at once.
I don't know. I do think it takes time, though. You know, that I still remember my first quilt was not just perfect by any means, and I know I've got a quilt at home that has a gazillion half square triangles on it, and I mean, what a job that was, and it was one of my first quilts that I ever did. But you just have to realize that it takes some time to get to that level. You need to be patient with yourself and not try to finish up a quilt. Don't be trying to just push yourself to get it done in this little tiny bit of time, because it takes a
time to
lot
be
of time, a lot of
precise.
hours of work, and don't be too hard on yourself. You know, it's a growing process.
And is there any like cutting tips people can follow? Is there any general rules so that will help them?
Every step of it affects the next. So
Yeah.
it is
Right.
that precision in your cutting.
Right.
Take the time,
it's
be precise.
Right. And I was going to show this too as well. This is a little quilt that I've made. I have a gal that used to live in my neighborhood, and she's actually having a baby tomorrow. I talked to her, and this is made out of elegance. She came into the shop, she picked out the fabric she wanted, then she came over after I cut all the blocks, and this is just made out of 10-inch squares. But after I had it all cut out, she came over And since some of the fabric is directional, I wanted her to lay it out how she wanted before I ever started to put any of the creamy pieces on.
Yeah.
But one thing that I did with this is I really wanted to think my pressing out before. So when I had that all laying out on my middle of my floor, then what I did is I pressed all of these seams down. I pressed this down, I pressed these up, so that those seams could once again kind of snuggle up next to one another. And I did that all along this row, and then the next row I did just opposite, because this was pressed down, I pressed this one up, I pressed this one down, and continued across the entire way.
And so that takes
But-
time.
It does.
Yeah.
It does, because you have to
You have
think
to think
out
about it.
every single block. You
Yeah.
had to think about, okay, which way is this just because you wanted it to be the right direction and everything. But as a result, my points, I think most of my points match.
Your points
There's
match.
probably one or two that are a little askew, but
And I remember being told when I started quilting, I was told you never press your seams open.
I know,
That's what I was
That's-
told.
right.
But that is not the case.
Oh, I agree. I agree.
You know, you do what is going to result in the nicest block. And
Right. I was always told you weren't supposed to press your seams open because when you had it quilted, all the batting would kind of come through. I don't know. I've never
issue with
had that
that.
happen. So I just think you have to do what is going to be the best for your end product.
yeah,
So just think ahead.
So,
So I
does the
remem-
pattern tell you though?
most of them, a lot of them will say press to the dark or, some of them will just say press.
Right.
But
some of them have arrows.
And I don't know if there's any book that says never press your seams open, but that's what I was told when I first started.
Yeah.
And then someone like VJ shows where she's pressed them on, and I'm like, oh, I have permission. I have permission. Because sometimes it makes the best result in the end.
Right.
So.
Yeah, you just have to use good judgment. And I know that comes with experience
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
It definitely does. So.
Great.
Anyway.
Thank you, VJ.
Oh,
Always
you're
good to teach us something new. So we will be doing a giveaway today. Post a comment below. Any tips you've been using to match your points? Or did you find anything we said today helpful? So we'd love to know. We will be giving away one of our Santa puzzles. So post a comment and we'll do a drawing. We do one each week and we will have a prize. So
Okay, wonderful.
thank you for joining us.
Have a
And
great week.
yeah, a good week and a merry holiday season. So thank you.